So thank you, everyone. This is the user experience meeting. Last Friday, we presented our roadmap to the TOC, but we sort of went over time because there was not enough time to do the whole thing. The feedback that I got from this roadmap is that what we agreed on last week was not everything they wanted. They liked Mitch's user story, and we gave them a full list of the work items we wanted to do with rankings, but they didn't feel that we were telling them why we wanted to do them. So I started putting single words or phrases in each item, such as correctness for the federated view or learnability in front of these items. And I think on Friday, we're going to have to go back with something better than that. So I'm trying to finish up and come up with the right words to get people to understand why we're doing these things. So I think we all agree. I mean, we all agreed on these items last week. And what I think is new is just how are we going to tell the TOC about them? Right. So all I wrote here was federated view of XDS events. I even forgot to link this one. I made it a P0. They didn't know what that was. It's, for the correctness of the proxy status command, we just need to sort of be able to put all that into this chart. Do we want to go through this line by line, or do we just trust me to do this before Friday? I'm going to do a good job. I just want to make sure I'm not trying to make everyone do this using my terminology. Or maybe Mitch, you and I can do this independently.
And I have some thoughts. If we want to do it now, that's fine. If we want to do it kind of offline, I can do that as well.
So,
at a high level, I think we can group a lot of things under the federated view of XDS events. This idea of getting all of our troubleshooting commands working across all supported topologies. That covers the troubleshooting API. That covers this security credentials stuff here. I think about half of what we're doing can probably be grouped under that use case.
And that's true, but the way that I broke this down into like which stakeholder wants it and then by priority and work items was not easy for the TOC to consume.
Yeah, I think it would be really helpful if these are translated to meaningful commands that users are using today. I think Mitch and I just had a conversation like on the VM scenario, proxy status with -- file parameter. So it's just critical for people to translate into how users are consuming these, like the federated view of XDS events. I assume that's proxy status and proxy config.
Yeah, yes. So I will refactor this item. Mitch, is there anything we want to discuss together right now about these items?
Well, I would recommend that we do more than just one word, like correctness here. I would recommend
agreed.
Out like a full use case.
Okay. So I'm happy to put the to-do of the commands being affected. And Istio deployment topology, Istio or control plane architecture affected, right? Because this affects when we don't have access to the control plane. So it's for that case. And I can write a paragraph about sort of each P0 and each P1.
Well, I think a lot, like I said, I think there's value in grouping a lot of them together. Rather than, we've got maybe 30 issues linked here. Rather than telling 30 different stories in terms of usability, telling the higher level stories, such as the all commands work across all environments. I think, like I said, I think we could group about half of them under that particular heading. That users of more exotic environments or topologies today struggle to use Istio commands, particularly troubleshooting commands. And so we've got the troubleshooting API, the federated view of XDS events, the security model, all of that kind of goes to fixing that, right?
And that makes sense. And so you think I should make epics for each of these higher level stories and then link the items with, or use the little GitHub checkboxes to help me manage it in GitHub and then put the stories here for presenting to the TOC?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And I'm happy to do some of that work with you if you would like.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. So I assume your individual work item are reflected to work item in GitHub, right? So for each of the individual work item, we just need to make sure it has a high level story associated with it so people understand the purpose of each individual work item.
Yes. So I will link each of these individual work items to one of these higher level stories. So one of them is finishing the refactor for Central STOD. We had a lot of items about that.
Well, I think your higher level story would be if as a user using Central STOD, I need to using istioctl to run my debugging commands, such as proxy status, proxy config. It would not be like refactor for Central STOD because that refactor is not transparent to user. All user knows is, I'm using istioctl to debugging.
Gotcha. So stuff at this level. Perfect. Okay. So I think Mitch and I can handle that on our own. I think the items that we agreed to do can all be easily grouped into 3 or 4 items of these higher level stories, and I can make issues or epics for them in GitHub and link them all up to the items with the priorities that we set here. I can make the high level story priorities the same as the highest priority of each item in its individual work items. All right, great. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the instructions that I wrote last weekend for using the experimental istioctl command variants. So not everyone is aware of this, but in the wiki, I wrote these instructions. I wrote them here rather than trying to get them through docs and release notes because I feel there's stuff here that we should be sort of trying out before we expect everyone to read it. So I encourage everyone to do it. The instructions now seem to work with what's been merged. I'll just go through this thing briefly because I think it's important. The first step is how to make certificates for using XDS-based. Well, so first, the background, which is not here, which is that there's the commands proxy status and version have a new implementation for Central STOD based on XDS. And we're trying to move everything over to that. For 1.8, we're trying to get rid of the old ones. So the first thing is to use the new commands, you need certificates. And there's a clunky way to make them using the make file. This tells how to do it. And I put an agenda item on the networking meeting for Thursday to figure out how to simplify this. Should istioctl be simplifying it, or should environments be simplifying the make file? So you run these commands to make the certificates. The next is, if you have Central STD, you expose it using a gateway and a virtual service on particular port with pass-through, so that you can expose to the outside world the HTTPS that istiod already does. And then you, using your new certificates, you use the experimental istioctl-x commands with all of these options: XDS address, authority, and certdir. And then you use the new configuration file feature that we dark launched to make those features the defaults. And after you do that, you can just do istioctl X version, or even if you prefer experimental true, you can just say istioctl version, and it will just work like from the user point of view, all the output will be exactly the same. So anyway, try that both to verify that central SUD works for you and to learn about these new configuration default settings things.
Hey, Ed, just a quick comment. I know some of the complexity around this was getting a certificate. In very recent code, we actually added, you can use the JOT token directly now. So that may help you a bit.
So it would be great, John, if you would tell me how to make that token, either through the makefile or through some commands, because I was unable to get that working.
Aren't you making the token as an intermediate step to make the certs?
I don't think so.
I'm at least the makefile I looked at, and I forget where I saw it. I think it was from your PR. You're making the token. So it's that token request thing into CubeCuddle, and then that gives you the token.
My PR got closed unmerged because that token stuff was based on stuff from CARSON that people couldn't get working. This is based on Stephen Dake's restoring the 1.6 makefile, and the fanciness is that the makefile puts the certificate chain and the certificate in different files, and we just have to combine them together, and that's really clunky. We either need to create targets, like you said, for the JWT token, or a target that combines the certificate chain and the certificate, or we need to get the ADSC library to handle what the makefile makes. And I just want to talk about that at networking meeting.
Right. I think I agree with John's approach, because in VM docs we're updating. We are not. It used to use the make command to get the certs, but right now we're moving with the token request path.
So I have a question. So I'm sorry, I didn't keep track this closely. I couldn't get the token working, and then I sidetracked work on some other stuff. So the issue with the key and certs to bootstrap the VM was when you generate the key and certs, you can't be like a namespace admin of any namespace. For instance, I can't be namespace admin of maybe Bookinfo namespace and then generate the key and certs. I have to be a higher level administrator, to my understanding, that have access to Istio system. Is that true? Because I thought there's definitely some type of privilege issue with this approach in VM. In 1.6, it was like debated very heavily.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Is the issue is you're getting the private key of Citadel.
Right. So
with the token approach, you're not. You just ask Kubernetes for a token and it gives you one.
Right. So John, that was my concern with this. If we are falling back to key and search approach, we're saying in order for user to onboarding istioctl commands for the data plane within central istiod environment, the user would somehow be able to retrieve the key and search, which is only accessible to the mesh admin.
So John has given me just in Slack instructions to make the JWT, which if that works, that's great. And we can get rid of all this very soon. So Lynn, to your point, this step here requires admin access. No user is going to be able to do this for central SDOD. So for central SDOD, the cloud provider has to do this and then send the user the output of this command, right? So the user only gets 3 files, not the files that came from here. So in these instructions, the first 2 pieces, this piece and this piece, are things that only the cloud provider can do. And then once you've done those things, my instructions say to log out of Kubernetes And then the stuff from here down, you can do without even Kubernetes access at all. So if we can get the JWT, we need less permissions to do this. But certainly you need admin permission to make this gateway. And then once you get down here, you need nothing.
Okay, that makes sense. So I'm assuming the gateway is like a one-time setup, which the admin could set up for every
Correct.
single Istio cluster. So that's probably less an issue because it's not like so much unique for
Yes.
each Istio cluster, but the key and certs are very much unique.
They are unique and they expire every, I forget, month or something.
Yeah.
So I was imagining something like, IBM Cloud does. You log in to IBM Cloud and you ask for your Kubernetes cluster config file junk. So that was my mental model. If John Howard's thing is better, I will try it out.
Okay. Yeah, please let us know. I think the token approach requires less permission to get the token with the key and certs, which requires much higher permission.
Okay, that'll be ideal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. So the next item is the thing we talked about for the roadmap, the unsharded view that's needed for Istio CuddlePS. So when I wrote these notes last Friday, I thought networking didn't want to do it. But since then, we have a PR from Austin that may be providing something. I didn't try out this PR. John, did you try it out? Or you reviewed it? So
Events one.
Where is the?
So the using the Kubernetes events.
Yeah, the one based on this item, XDS event reporting, I think.
Yes.
I forgot to link it here, but do we think that is going to be sufficient to allow istioctl to see all of the endpoints and do istioctl.ps and wait?
It's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be sufficient. There are additional things we probably want to do. I mean, it's kind of a fallback worst case scenario because it relies on events from API server which are not very reliable. They're ephemeral. That's the correct term. So the API server may hold them as long as they need. The most important reason I added this is that it allows us to report events back to the pod in a multi-cluster scenario. If you have a pod in a random cluster, you will be able to see all the events, NACs, and other things associated with the pod.
Okay.
For the synchronization, it is an easy way to sync, but John raised some valid concerns that it may have corner cases.
Right. So for the sync, we need correctness. We need to be able to.
So we still want to do direct connections, yes. The problem is that for direct connection also we have corner cases. So I believe that the combination of the events plus direct connections is sufficient for most use. I mean, it's a debug tool. It's not supposed to be 100% accurate.
Understandable.
The system is recovering, so every 15 minutes. I mean, even if the eventing doesn't is dropped, because we reconnect every 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I don't remember what's the current status. The system, even if it hits one of the corner cases, it will recover and it will be eventually consistent. It's just that you may have some special cases where you do not see you miss some endpoints. That's really the only problem.
Okay. So for me to feel comfortable, I'm probably going to want to just test it. I'm probably going to want to just create a cluster with 3 STODs running in a deployment and see if I get the status of all of them.
To be clear, right now the PR doesn't have the sync itself. I mean, I'm still working on it. What is important, what you will be able to see is that the connect and disconnect show up in kubectl describe, and you will see all the connect and disconnect events across all clusters.
Okay.
There are two ways to get the status. And basically, one is to watch the events, and then you should see, in real time when endpoints connect, disconnect, and then keep track of them. The other one is to actually get this information in Istio and added code for Istio to watch the event itself and to build the database. That's not yet completed. Right now, the purpose of the PR is to, test it so we see how bad it is in terms of, performance, scalability, how long the events are saved. So to get additional information about the behavior of API server. We have a second plan described in the document, which is to use a proper pub subsystem to collect the same thing. That one would be super reliable, but it has a dependency on something. So,
is there any chance of that being around for 1.8?
The change is not very big. It's very similar with what I'm doing. So whatever I'm doing for Kubernetes eventing will apply for any other system. It's basically just a subscribe and publish. I think if the Kubernetes events work, I don't think there is a lot of motivation to finish that up. But if it doesn't work, then probably we'll have to do it.
So the other way to do it, Kostin, is to have us do it. And UX may not be able to do it as deeply as you want. My thought had been just to, have instead of exposing Istio directly, maybe expose some front end that goes back and queries all of the Istio pods or something.
So Ed, if we had a way to query all Istio pods, we would do it. We would not have this problem. The problem is that we do not have a very good way to find all, because you have multi-cluster, you have too many scenarios. It is if you are willing to have some code that is connecting to all Istio, just put it in package util, and Istio itself can do it, can connect. So this PR will work in conjunction with what you described, basically having some code that is connecting directly to all Istio.
So is it? Are you saying it's a bad idea?
No. I'm saying it's not. It's well. It's not a bad idea, but it doesn't work by itself, because also I mentioned there are corner cases. You do not have ability to know all the Istio that exist in the system in all cases.
So we've bumped into this problem before, and it seems like whether we're talking about a pub subsystem that they all use, or we're talking about connecting directly to all of them or eventing, I think the same problem comes into play. The question that we're asking is, which Istio instances are in scope for this aggregation, right? Like if you're aggregating, let's say, status data, do you take absolutely every instance of Istio that's running in the cluster? Is that enough, or are there other clusters? So I think we should sort of separate that out into its own space in terms of the problem.
So
solve it once, and then use that solution on whatever pub sub or communication protocol we land on.
You saw my wiki instructions to expose this virtual service for Istio. You could imagine that this destination is a subset of an Istio that is unique to my particular setup. So I'm sort of saying I'm going to expose a subset for Coca-Cola. I'm expose a subset for Pepsi.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. So I see that as being sort of fine if I can come up with a way to do that.
So if you are a single cluster, if you have a single central cluster, it's fine. It's not a problem. And again, if you have code that is connecting to all Istio all I'm asking is to link that code into Istio itself. because besides debugging, we also want to have a way for Istio-Ds to synchronize with each other, to be able to get in real time information that other Istio-Ds have. Like, for example, if a knock happens, we want all Istio-Ds to know that that particular config is bad so they don't push. We want all Istio-Ds to know what other Istio-Ds exist in system and what loads they have, how many endpoints they have, so they can rebalance. We want, when an endpoint connects to an Istio-D, the other Istio-Ds to find out immediately, so we don't have latency. So there are many networking related features that depend on Istio-D or can be improved if Istio-D can connect to all the other Istio-Ds. The question is, in the simple case, I think your code would work perfectly, and if you are only concerned with solving the problem for one central Istio-D cluster, then it's fine and it's a perfect start, as long as it's in Istio-D itself. But if you have to have multi-region, for example, you have a cluster per region, then you have problems. How do you discover, all the Istio-Ds from the other cluster? So you have the scenarios where you run Istio-Ds on-prem because you have some for fallback.
So that makes sense. The last item I have here when I was thinking about this is maybe we need to change the meaning of commands like proxy status. Maybe proxy status needs some other thing, like we only want to know the proxy status of a single Istio-D. We pass that in as an argument, maybe through a header, and we use some header routing to get it to the right instance if it were on a single cluster, or the right data center, or we have a data center flag in proxy status. I'm willing to, if it's too hard to, if it's a general multi cluster computing problem that we haven't solved, we can make PS do less.
That's another option. If you're okay to restricting a bit PS, then I think the eventing will work perfectly for you, because if you're saying that you are okay with proxy status of all the proxies that checked in the last half hour, then proxy status become equivalent with kubectl get events.
That's fine with me. My big fear is if there's two pods and I do PS and 50% of the time I get one set of pods and 50% of the time I get the other.
So this won't work for central Istio-D, right? Like getting events would be getting events presumably from the cluster that the control plane is running in?
No. The way it is implemented, you get events from the cluster where the pod is running, because you need to associate the event with the pod. So in reality, if you are in a namespace, if you just do kubectl describe on each pods, you will see where they are connected, each pod individually, and that is very reliable. So if you have a pod, if you actually know a pod or the list of pods, you can find exactly where they are connected.
And when you say pod, you're referring to the application workload pod?
Application workload pod, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the application workload pod, yes, exactly. Because that's a part where there is no problem. When you do kubectl describe on the pod, Kubernetes retains the events associated with the pod. So you can see that the pod, pulled an image, did start, did readiness check. You'll also see that connected to a particular Istio-D, and you can get the actual Istio-D where it's connected.
Okay, that's interesting.
And it's very useful because, again, for a user, it just needs to do kubectl describe on the pod, and it can get also probably will be able to get knocks that particular pod received. So, and I think that's the most important use case. You carry in your namespace how all the pods are connected and where.
Okay, I think that's worth playing with.
And what Ed was saying about restricting, right now PS is giving you all the pods all across the mesh. That has some security and privacy implication. If you are a namespace admin, because central Istio-D is that's kind of the premise that you are splitting. So I think restricting the semantic of PS to mean in a one namespace, and for the pods that are currently running, we can easily support it.
Well, we can still try to hit all namespaces, but if it's a kubectl operation that underlies it, it'll respect Kubernetes RBAC, right? If you don't have access to the namespace, you won't get those results.
Yes, but it's getting a bit more complicated and complex, and let's. If we are going to change the semantics, let's change it to something that it's easy to support, because per namespace, that's a unit of granularity. We can extend it to namespace, multiple namespace as a tenancy unit when Kubernetes has it and we have it. But I don't want to rely on RBAC too much, because there are VMs that we need to consider. There are all kinds of other things that And that's really where the problem starts. I mean, for a VM, we don't have pod status, and then we have to do other stuff.
So this would not work for VMs then, is what you're saying?
Well, it could work, but we need to have some way some place to attach the events.
Maybe the workload entry?
Exactly. But again, that's some code that someone is right. I mean, it's the code is not complicated. If you look at the code, it's very straightforward. It's just calling a library with whatever data you want to pass. It's just, we need testing and to get it
okay.
to a certain level.
Costin, one more question regarding ACKs and NACKs, the way that we're using them here. Are NACKs permanent?
No, they're not permanent. I mean, if you...
So what is a good way to understand that a NACK has been resolved when you're looking at an event stream?
That's a good point. I haven't thought about it.
After it, and it's good to go, right? Actually, no, that's not true. We can push partial sources.
Yeah, that's a good question.
The
I don't
only
know.
way is if you know exactly what config we push. Like you need a more granular level. You can't just say LBS. You have to say the 443 listener was rejected, and then later the 443 listener was accepted, I think.
Yeah, so we've got some sort of a key value operation going on, right? Where each key represents a NACK or ACKable resource, and you want to see the last message sent on each key. Is that about right?
I think we also need to be very careful about not overwhelming the system. So we definitely can send the NACKs to the pod. So you will see that pod got a NACK. The question is, how do we revert it? How do we delete that event? And there is a delete operation, and we can also send ACK. I mean, hey, everything is okay for this pod when it is resolved, but we cannot send all ACKs all the time. So
I'm a little bit confused by that. We want to delete the NACK? I mean, that NACK happened, right? It's a valid event.
Yeah, probably we don't want to delete. Yeah, probably we don't want to. We want to send an ACK, but only if we previously. So we want to send ACKs, but only if we previously send an ACK. That's easy if you are within a connection because you know that you sent an ACK, you got an ACK. But if you reconnect, then we don't have this information. However, if you reconnect, if the istioctl is able to interpret the stream to say, hey, NACK connect, and no additional NACK, it means it's okay, then we are fine.
Okay.
It's not very straightforward, but I think the logic works. I mean, it's basically we send a NACK, and within the same connection, if we keep tracks that we send a NACK, and when it is resolved, we revert it, basically. But John is right. It's probably per resource, and probably need to include additional information in the NACK so the user knows what to do with it.
Okay.
Great, and thanks for coming to the meeting, by the way, Costin. I think this really helps. I have no one has reviewed my PR for verify install. I think it may be too late for 1.7, but maybe 1.7.1. It's totally needed, especially on Kubernetes 1.18. So I'm hoping someone can review that. The last item I have is I went through all of the istioctl commands because we've been wanting to break them down by role. And I realized that a lot of the commands I think no one uses anymore, and we should get rid of for reasons of documentation and technical debt. So I went through all of the commands, and the commands that I think the commands that I never use, I marked in orange, and I indicated whether it had documentation. And I wanted to see sort of what the people on this call think are the bad commands and what are the popular commands, so that we can sort of focus our effort on improving the good ones and getting rid of the ones that no one is using currently.
So Ed, did you color code or classify them as cluster admin versus pod user?
So next week, I'm hoping to do that. So next week, I have to get back to this work in progress item to separate them. And then I broke these all down by admin versus workload and user. And so I was hoping that before we could do that, that we would look at if there's any commands we can just totally get rid of completely.
It may be easier if we first split them, because anyway, that's fine. I was looking at CubeInject, for example, and CubeInject is actually an admin command right now because it requires Istio system to get config map, which is surprising. So if we break down by what's the access, and then, I mean, CubeInject as cluster admin doesn't make any sense, but if it's fixed to work for a regular user, then it's a super important command. It's probably the most important.
So
because it needs access to the mesh configuration file, unless you specify.
Yeah, you need access to read the config maps from Istio system.
So CubeInject can take local files.
Yes.
So it could be that the same process that we used to get certs, we could get those config files and give the user a bundle of things, including what they need for CubeInject. So I put this to do here, and I will make a work item to discuss that next week.
Yes, we can definitely return the file over XDS. So since we have connection to istiod, we can get them, but we cannot do is basically Cube API to connect to Istio system and get them. That's my point. So we need fixes basically. Over XDS, we can return them. You know, we use only files, whatever.
Okay.
And there is also the larger item of, do we want to actually let users specify an injection template in their own namespace? In which case we need to modify the injector to actually inject the files with config, so then give back the user the control basically, which is they already have with CubeInject. They can use local files. So it's not really that we are giving them extra.
That makes sense.
It was just an example, I mean, of why it's important to split them first into and to understand the implications of pod admin, of namespace admin. Yeah.
You're right. I'll move all these discussion I just typed into the other document.
Yeah.
So right now, I just thought I would go through and ask people first. So
yeah, let's go through your list.
So everyone loves Analyze. So people have been asking for this auth-until-less check, so I'm bringing it back.
Yeah.
Convert Ingress I haven't used since 1.1.
Is that an experimental command?
It graduated. It is mainline, but I think Ram told me people still use it. I have not used it in a year.
And also things have changed. I mean, at that point where we were deprecating or thinking about deprecating the Ingress, now we are supporting it again, and we also support the Kubernetes Gateways first class. John, you are the?
Yeah, I think if you want to migrate from Ingress to Istio APIs, that's fine. The output that the tool gives you is probably not the actual optimal output.
Yep.
So maybe it's used as a starting point, but the APIs aren't that complicated anyways. So I don't know. I mean, I don't care too much either way.
Let's kill it. Let's propose killing it, and because less is more.
Okay.
Well, if people are using it, there may be some value on there, because the instruction did say this output should be considered a starting point for your Istio configuration and probably requires a minor modification.
But is it something we want to support long term? I mean, does it provide enough value for us to spend the time on it?
Well, so the Ingress support that John added, does that work on all the Kubernetes versions? That's what I'm.
Ingress has been supported for quite a while. I just made some improvements to it, and yeah, it's supported. Well, so there's two different things. There's Ingress, which has been around for a while, and then there's the new Kubernetes Gateway stuff. The new Kubernetes Gateway stuff, yes, it works on all Kubernetes versions, but you have to like install a separate project, CRD, and it's like alpha. Like no one's using that. We should basically ignore it for this conversation.
Okay.
But
also, like when you say people are using it, it's not like a command that people use every day and we're deprecating it. It's going to break them. Like this is a one-off command you run, right?
And can be replaced
this
with an
is a
example.
one-off command.
Can be replaced with an example. This is with equivalent config if you want to. You don't need a command for.
There's no docs for this thing other than itself, so I'm thinking we should kill it.
Yep.
I'm thinking we should kill it too. I just trying to think, what are the process to kill it? Was just take it down and people would complain, especially ROMs that people are using it.
No.
So the other choice is to hide or make it experimental again.
Yeah, deprecate, hide, and if people complain, we can address it. Yeah.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't know do we have a deprecation policy for istioctl commands today?
I assume it's the same with all APIs, no?
And we have a deprecation policy for
So
those?
we have to we are allowed to take commands away, but we have to keep them around for a version where they say they're deprecated.
Yeah,
So
essentially we write the standard out every time with a warning, this command is deprecated in 1.8 and we'll
Yep.
change it in 1.9.
Yep.
Yeah, I would be comfortable with the process that at least give people a little bit of time.
Yeah, one revision is perfect, and then they can use a version from 1.8 in future if they really need it.
So I'm going to suggest we make it experimental again. Target
No,
for removal.
You cannot make it experimental again. You just need to deprecate it. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Target for removal in 1.9 or 1.8?
In 1.9. We have to follow the process. The process is deprecate and then remove.
Okay.
On this one, anyways, it's not the end of the world if it sticks around. So
Yeah.
Dashboard is interesting because again doesn't make sense for central Istio. So that's an important one to deprecate and kill if.
So people seem to love it though.
No. I think dashboard is useful because people. So the whole purpose of dashboard is for people who can't remember the port forward command. I know you're going to laugh, but I always have to look up the doc to remember those commands. So the dashboard is really helpful for people to launch these for testing purpose.
But Lynn, the port command will no longer work.
No, but only for some of them though. Like Envoy. Like dashboard Envoy is runs on every pod, like that's fine. And Kiale, Jaeger, Prometheus, you run those in your cluster most likely.
Control Z, I can deprecate, if you want.
Yeah.
Well, do we need to? We can just make it not work if.
Right.
Like
so
just send an error message if you use Central Istio. That's
I'd prefer that because sometimes you work with single cluster.
Yeah.
I'm happy to keep them all here. Also, the possibility exists for extending them. So currently, they look for Prometheus in Istio system. It could be that we have a config map that tells you where your Prometheus is, for example, and we find it that way.
Yeah. So if we can't work, can we just give a warning? Hey, this command is not supported in your environment.
So we want to support these things if we can. So I guess my question, and this may be a better question for next week, is for some of these commands, do we need a new implementation for Central Istio?
Let me ask you another question. What is the status of authentication for all those things? I mean, if we have JOT authentication, some form of authentication, where like we added for XDS, and we configure those things behind a gateway and
that's not our concern. Those are user applications now.
Yeah, that's true. No, but we can have a gateway configuration that is doing JOT authentication consistently, and then we don't care what they are doing. We have authentications that we control, and then
that's up to you if the application supports it, like with Kayali.
Okay, let's keep it. Right. Let's keep it. That's fine.
I do like the idea of making them a little bit more intelligent, though, like perhaps replacing Prometheus with a single telemetry command that will do some logic around detecting where our mixerless config is sending its telemetry data and attempting to port forward to that for supporting things beyond just the Prometheus API.
It's actually the opposite. It's Prometheus scrapes the envoys, so you can't really reverse look at it.
Really, my concern here is that first of all, it's an admin command. It's not a user command, and I think we need to focus mostly on users. and users will not have access to the Prometheus namespace, will not have access to Zipkin, and we are encouraging a very bad practice of actually requiring tools, debug tools, to do high privilege operation. Even for admin, I mean, if I want to access Prometheus, I shouldn't have to have CubeInject access to the Prometheus pod.
So I totally agree, Preston. But what I want is Dashboard Prometheus to still work. So what I'm proposing is that when the cloud provider sets up your environment with Prometheus and they create some way to get to that, be it a virtual gateway or something, that they put that in a config map that the user can see in the user's own cluster. So there's some way for istioctl to say, look, your admin set up Prometheus here.
Config map in each namespace. Again, keep in mind difference between.
Maybe there needs to be a thing.
I'm a booking for developer, basically. Think as a booking for developer.
Right. So I mean, so in my cloud, I have Istio system, Cube system, and IBM system. It would be great if in one of those systems or in a fourth system, I was able to know the things that my cloud operator wanted me to use.
So
Yeah,
We should do this.
I
Prometheus is not Istio. It's not an Istio concern anymore.
Okay, that's
right?
fair enough. Maybe we can't have it in istioctl.
Zipkin is not an Istio system. Kiali is not our problem either, more or less.
I think it's a little bit, it could be helpful to think of this not as a command that is designed for troubleshooting. This is not the way that we would recommend that anyone continuously access their Prometheus system in a production environment. Instead, it's a helper command that is useful when starting off with Istio. It's good so far as it goes, but it's not designed to be used permanently or for troubleshooting or anything like that.
But Mitch, we should not waste time with those kind of tools. I mean, those are, we can keep it, it doesn't matter, but we need to focus on the user or book info user who right now will not be able to do anything because those commands require admin in Istio system.
Those are both valid users of our system, Costin. We definitely need to increase the focus on the user of like an application namespace owner, that sort of thing. Increased focus there is good, but removing existing functionality for other users is not the way that we go about doing that, right? And we just add new commands for that particular user type.
I think if the functionality is probably wrong, I mean, doesn't follow good practices, I think we should remove it. I mean, this is a perfect example of functionalities that it's, you should not run stuff with the root, basically.
I mean, our demo used to be, install book info. Now you can bring up Kiali, you can bring up Prometheus and Grafana.
Sure. And our demo is
you're installing the demo profile. You've installed the add-ons. They're all there. Now we're going to say, but we're not going to tell you how to find that stuff. You're going to find it on your own with CubeInject.
Sure, but it doesn't have to be istioctl command. I mean, we can. It's a demo of how to not do things, basically. So if you want to have a demo, you should, have a big font saying this is not something you would do in production, and run as root. So again, we are focused on demo, not on production, and.
We're not focusing there. We're simply not removing the functionality, Costin. We're not adding any new functionality here or investing here, right?
I think I'm promoting some functionality. So remember, we have that new dark launched istioctl defaults. It could be that the Prometheus thing just sets up a port forward, something that's in that default file. So it literally just looks up something on your local file system and does something.
But how it's even implemented? How do you even know which Prometheus it is? I mean, it can be in any namespace. It can be running as other user. It may be in a remote cluster because that's also possible.
I'm suggesting that your cloud provider, when you install Istio, gives you a configuration that you can then use.
I'm perfectly fine with keeping this command, but I think what you're proposing is far and not accurate because first of all, the cloud provider may not even provide Prometheus. They may provide 15 different Prometheuses that are doing all sorts of federation and other things, or anything in between. Like Prometheus is not part of Istio, and we do not dictate how a user connects to Prometheus. If we want a command that says here's how it works in the demo profile, and it's great for users getting started, perfectly fine with that. But let's not try and get production users to use some istioctl dashboard command. That's outside of our scope, in my opinion.
How about having an Istio demo command, which is, as you said, useful for people who do demos, and then you can have dashboards there. We keep the code, we keep everything. That's Istio demo. And then for production users and what we want to actually support and tell users of central IstioD, we have a clean istioctl that is, or Istio user, whatever you want to call it, that is focused on things we can do for central IstioD and managed Istio cases.
So the envoy command out of dashboard, would that be useful for production as well?
What does it do?
It forwards to the Envoy proxy's admin console.
And you can debug things if your virtual service or destination rule doesn't work.
I don't know. That's
there is a little bit of information that the Envoy admin panel will give you that we do not provide any other interface to in Istio.
Do we expect production users, real production users? I mean, again, my focus is will even have the admin on.
So istioctl largely breaks if, oh, you're saying if admin is not on. Well, that's how config dump works. So all of our troubleshooting tooling is kind of based around that being functional.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, I use the Envoy thing like 100 times a day.
And I use it 100 times a day. And,
I use it too.
And I have some items that I want to get to later on in the week, later in the month, about how to make Envoy filters based on looking at that config dump. But I think we've spent way too long on dashboard.
Yeah. Okay.
Keep going. Deregister.
Done. Kill it.
Kill it.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, just Metacom, we have like, I don't even know how many commands, like 4 or 5 commands for VMs. We really need to kill all the irrelevant ones and then make it work.
Is it too late to kill in 1.8?
Yeah.
Okay. So we use help and install all the time.
Who needs help?
I use help all the time.
Do we have register command, or that's already been removed?
We do have register. And
oh, okay, you have it down. I'm sorry.
Yes. So I think we all like manifest. I don't know if we have anyone from environments here. We never define what manifest is. It makes no sense to me that we have this command manifest, because it's very related to our concept of a profile.
Yeah, same comment as before. Can we move it to Istio admin or something that is, again, because the regular users will not use it.
It's definitely gonna move there.
Yeah, and I think manifest is confusing. Didn't we remove manifest apply in 1.7 now?
Yes, we removed manifest apply, but we kept diff generate and install.
Yeah, I just think manifest is not intuitive. I mean,
I agree.
I always have trouble think of that command.
I want to get rid of it. I might want to move some of those things to the 2 related commands, operator and profile.
So if Helm 3 supports becomes beta in 1.8, I think it's reasonable to get rid of it because it will have the equivalent functionality.
Yeah. Let's just be careful about how quickly we're removing these things. We have to remember that we asked everybody in the 1.4 to 1.5 time frame to stop using Helm and start using manifest. So let's not move off of it too quickly.
Well, we asked them to stop using the old Helm templates and move to the new Helm templates, really. That's...
the communication that we put out on Discourse and on istio.io asked them to move to operator and said that the new Helm templates were also supported but not recommended.
Yeah, no, all time, yeah. But now we are going to tell them to move to central IstioD, which is kind of, or manage IstioD. I don't know. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, by the way, from Service Mesh Con yesterday, there's a lot of users asking about Helm, apparently. And there are a lot of users asking, when can they go back to Helm? They don't like to use istioctl commands to install.
It's as soon as someone adds a test and move it to beta. I mean, it's working perfectly fine.
Okay.
I'm only using Helm, by the way. I mean, I haven't used operator in a long time.
Wow, you are setting a new standard for us.
Because I'm the only one maintaining Helm 3, apparently, and there's supposed to be someone else, and if nobody's using it, it dies.
So in the interest of time, I think we need to kill register along with deregister, correct?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. I'm not going to go through in the interest of time, unless everybody begs me, the experimental commands.
Nope.
So we will talk about them again next week.
Okay. Don't you have a few commands upgrade that's non-experimental, or those are experimental too?
So I forget about if upgrade is even still here, but upgrade and install are the same. Here we go. Upgrade. Does anyone use it? It's basically just
Yeah.
No, I think upgrade
yesterday
is a
to
bad
do
idea.
in place.
There's a work item to make upgrade really upgrade, because right now upgrade doesn't preserve your settings.
But with revisions, there is no upgrade per se. It's basically just deploy a new revision.
But
So
yes, that's true.
migrate is a different command. I mean, or switch revision or traffic shift, but that's not upgrade.
So do we like upgrade or do we dislike it?
Well, only if we deprecate and remove in-place upgrade. Else, this is the command for people to do in place. And that's one day we said we're not going to support in-place upgrade.
How about demo? Istio demo will have upgrade, because for demo user it's perfectly fine to lose traffic, but production users will definitely not.
Well, demo user doesn't care about upgrade. I never upgrade.
Then who cares? I mean, the production users don't care about in-place upgrade either, I hope.
Well,
I mean,
there are users who haven't moved to Canary. Those are the users who would use in-place upgrade. But I do find out those users, like in our managed Istio team, they just using manifest apply instead of upgrade.
Lynn, what's the difference in your mind between install and upgrade? Because install, upgrade, and manifest apply were all the same.
It is the same. The only difference is the upgrade command actually give you warnings if you have certain configuration that may not be meaningful.
How about
the main
install?
difference I've seen is that upgrade doesn't work and apply does work. I don't know.
That is the other thing.
That's all. That's the only thing I've noticed, to be honest. I've never really thought we should have an upgrade command, because we should be declarative, ideally.
So upgrade does more checks, and if those checks fails, it would block the upgrade, which I think we find some issue right before the release this time.
But install should do the same thing. I mean, if it detects that there is already an install in place, it should fail.
Should we make install take a check equals true or false to deal with
Maybe.
that?
We'd have to see what's failing. Like, it may make sense to always have those checks, or maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the part where it fails more often is not working as intended. I mean, there were bugs, not like it was smartly failing or anything.
So a lot of the stuff for the checks might have been based on that we store the Istio operator there, and that PR that I asked people to verify might fix those problems. But anyway, we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to let everybody go. Thank you so much, and we will talk next week.
Thanks, Ed.